Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to this week's Friday Reads, where I talk about everything that I read in the last week, what I'm currently in the middle of, and what I think I'm going to be getting to next week. And once again, we have lots of books to talk about, so we're going to jump right in with the very first book that I finished, which was Court Duel by Sherwood Smith. And this is the second book in the Crown and Court series, like duology, which is a YA fantasy duology. And in this second book, we are following our main character of Mel, who, after the events of the first book, has decided to go to court to kind of see how things work and maybe also help determine who is going to be the best person to be king. But she is absolutely terrified because she has never been trained to be at court, and she just really doesn't want to be known as the court, like the country bumpkin. And the story kind of goes from there. And I really like the second book, definitely much more than the first book. It's got political maneuvering, which I really enjoy, and I like that especially because it's YA, it keeps it really fast paced, so we don't get super bogged down in details like we sometimes do with adult books that are politically complex. So it moved very quickly. We still got some of that political intrigue, which was nice. I really liked watching Mel grow as a character and like build relationships with new people and kind of work to better herself. I just generally really enjoyed it. The only issue that I had is that this is YA, and so it isn't as complex. And so even though that kept it very fast paced, it did mean that it felt very simplistic at times in a way that I just found I didn't enjoy as much. So I still really enjoyed my time with it, but I don't think I can count this as a favorite of mine anymore. It's more like a YA favorite, not a favorite of all time. But I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, so I still liked it a lot. And then, okay, so this book that we're going to talk about next is Acorn Cove by Kay O'Neill, which is a kid's graphic novel. And I finished this at some point in August. I don't actually know when because I didn't remember to write it down, but I don't think I've talked about it, so I'm going to talk about it now. But Acorn Cove, like I said, is a kid's graphic novel, and we are following our main character who is traveling with her dad back to this island community that they used to live in. The only problem is that this is the island community that they used to live in with her mom, and her mom died in a big storm, and it's pretty clear that she and her dad have not fully grappled with all their feelings of grief. That is one of the storylines. There is another storyline that's a little bit more climate change kind of friendly type of deal that is actually just as strong as that grief storyline. But that one's a little bit harder to talk about without giving away some spoilers. But obviously some content warnings there for death of a parent and dealing with that grief. However, it doesn't get super like graphic in any of that because this is a kid's graphic novel, so of course it wouldn't. But I really like this. Kay O'Neill has a very specific illustration style that I generally just really enjoy. I think they do a really good job of touching on these kind of heavy topics and having a really good message for kids. Now, I did think in this particular book that message got a little bit too pointed at times, even more so than what we got in the T-Dragon series. But I still think it was a really good, there were really good messages, and the story itself was also just generally really good. So it was not that long. It was only like 95 pages. And so it took me like maybe an hour to read. And it was just a really enjoyable way to spend an hour. And I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. And then I picked up Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey. This is an adult this is an adult novella. We're going to say that. How about that? I don't want to give too much more of the genre because I think that would give away some things that are maybe not quite as clear in the beginning. I picked this up because it became very clear that I was not going to finish all of my books that I had planned for the Magical Readathon, so I subbed this book in, and I am not sad that I did. I actually generally really enjoyed this, with some caveats. Okay, so in this book, we're following our main character of Esther, who decides to run away from her home and join up with the librarians who travel through the country distributing approved materials. But it becomes clear to her very quickly that maybe what she thought the librarians were is not altogether correct. And the story kind of goes from there. And I really enjoyed this. This definitely has like a Western kind of feel to it, like an Old West, which I don't always enjoy, but I thought was done pretty well here. I didn't necessarily love the characters, but I did like watching the characters interact, which I think is like in some ways more important, especially for a novella. And I generally liked the world building for this. We didn't get a ton of it, but we got enough to like intrigue me and just generally interest me in how this world works. And I did find it fascinating, like how we got there were multiple things that we were finding out were like maybe not quite what we thought they would be, which is, I know, very ambiguous, but also I don't want to spoil anything, right? And then I generally liked the ideas of the plot and like what the plot was. I did not, however, love the execution, because there were two critical plot points that you can't look at them too hard, otherwise they start to fall apart. For example, one of these plot points relies on this character doing a thing that it actually doesn't make a ton of sense for her to be doing. And we're not given any explanation of her motivations. So it's kind of that thing where you're sitting here going, but like, why would she even do this? It's critical for the plot that she does this, but it doesn't make any sense that she would. And again, given no explanation. And there's another plot point that is very much similar in that you can't look at it too hard without it you just end up with a lot of questions about the choices that the author made. So from that perspective, I definitely dropped the rating, because that is some really big things to be messing up on. But I did really enjoy it. And like, even as I noticed those things, it didn't really bother me until after I had finished the book and I was like talking to other people about it, and I was just like, oh, that is really annoying. So I have some very mixed feelings, and I did end up rating this like 3.75 stars, because I generally did have a good time while reading it. And it has definitely inspired me to go seek out Sarah Gailey's other works and see how I fare with them. So I would call this a success. And then the last thing that I finished this week was The Tropic of Serpents by Marie Brennan. And this is the second book in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series, which is an adult fantasy series. And we're following our main character of Isabella Camhurst as she is on her path to becoming the world-renowned dragon naturalist. And this is fascinating because it has this framing device where it is written as a memoir. So our narrator is Lady Trent, Isabella Camhurst, in like the future, looking back on these exploits. And I think that that's fascinating, and I adore it so much. Like I love Lady Trent as a character, and especially like what she has to say in her narration is just hilarious, and I love it. I really liked this book in general. I think that the plot was fine. It was maybe not my favorite. It didn't like suck me in or anything, although it still was very interesting. I loved watching Isabella kind of figure out some of these, like, we're watching her find out more about dragons, and it's sparking her curiosity, and she's bringing new information back home. And I love watching her kind of work through that scientific process. I love the characters in here, and there is some serious character development in this book, which I also adore. The one thing that I do still struggle with a little bit, although less in this book than in the previous book, is that it's written in a style that is reminiscent of like Victorian. So even though this is definitely a fantasy world, that does not map onto our world at all. It's completely different. It feels very much Victorian in its execution, and that translates very much to like the writing style that Lady Trent is using as she is telling her memoir. And I do struggle with that writing style a little bit, but because I knew to expect it this time, it was easier to get into the flow of things, but it's definitely not exactly my favorite. But overall, this was still really enjoyable, and I ended up giving it 4.25 stars. So on to the books that I am currently in the middle of, and we're going to start with Seasonal Fears by Shauna Maguire, the second book in the Alchemical Journals series, companion series. I have made zero progress on this. I'm still 6 pages in, and I am officially putting this off to the side, predominantly because I realized that I have so many other things that are like clamoring for my attention that I really don't have a ton of like brain space really to give this book the attention that it needs as I'm reading it. So I'm going to read a few of those other things first, and then I'll come back to this probably near the end of September, maybe early October. I think I'll be able to like really focus on it at that point, which I think also would be good because I think this is going to be a good like transition into spooky season. So yes, not any further, gonna put it off to the side. And then I'm also in the middle of Ruby Fever by Ilona Andrews. I'm still on page 16. I have made zero progress on this, but this is my new focus. Like this is what I'm going to be like focusing on next. So even though I haven't made any progress, I'm really excited because this is, I have been waiting for this for a while. And then the other thing that I'm in the middle of still is The Green Witch by Erin Murphy Hiscock. And I think I'm a little bit further in than when I last talked to you. I'm on page 88, and so not terribly much further, I don't think. And I'm still having the same issue where they're still talking about like energies, which is a concept that I don't necessarily believe in. So it's a little bit slower going. But I did make progress on it. So what am I going to be getting to next week? Obviously, my focus is on Ruby Fever. This will probably take maybe a day or two to get through because I'm really excited to get to it and I just want to read this book. I'm also going to continue to make progress on The Green Witch. I don't expect I'll be done with this by next week. Because I think it is just one of those books I'm just going to read a little bit more slowly alongside other things, but I do at least want to continue to make progress. I also need to read The Brightest Spell because my buddy is now finished with this book and I haven't even started it. So I need to get moving on this one. I will probably, hopefully, I will start and finish this book in the coming week. And then some other possibilities are The Gentleman and the Thief by Sarah Eden, which is the second book in this series. And then Vengeance and Death by J.D. Robb, which is the 6th book in the In Death series. And this is the last chance book. If I don't like this book kind of a lot, I'm DNFing this series. So a lot is writing on this one. But that's it. Those are the things that I read, what I'm in the middle of, what I think I might be getting to in the next week. I'm really excited for it to be September and like not have any obligations really as to books that I need to read other than The Brightest Spell, and just kind of decide, you know, as I'm going, what I'm going to pick up. But that is it. If you have any thoughts or feelings about any of the books that I mentioned, please leave me a comment down below. But that's it. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to, and until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!